Grammar with Teacher Mark. This lesson is about not saying more better. So don't say more better. I'm hearing this more and more these days. The ER suffix on an adjective means the same thing as more. If you say more better, you are being redundant. That is, you are saying the same thing twice. You should only say better. We only place more in front of adjectives that have more than one syllable, excluding Y as a syllable. For example, more beautiful. Beautiful has 3 syllables, so we put more in front of it. Now the Y in a word like lovely is not counted as a second syllable. Lovely actually is 2 syllables, lovely. But here, instead, we change the Y to I and add the ER. Lovelier. Adjectives with ER, or the word more in front of them, are called comparative adjectives because they compare two things. Comparative adjectives that use ER would be like big, bigger, small, smaller, black, blacker, bold, bolder, bright, brighter, clever, cleverer, cleverer, cold, colder, hot, hotter. Notice that I pronounce my T's a little bit like the British do. Most Americans would just say hotter, but I do tend to pronounce the T's a little bit hotter. Anyway, moving on. Great, greater. Strong, stronger. Weak, weaker. Young, younger. Old, older. Thick, thicker, with the opposite being thin, thinner. At the bottom of the list, I have 3 adjectives that end in Y. Now, angry, bossy, and happy are actually 2-syllable words, but for the issue of comparative adjectives, we don't count the Y as a separate syllable. We just change the Y to I and add ER. So we say angry, angrier, bossy, bossier, happy, happier. Now moving to the right side, these are comparative adjectives that use more. Why? Because they are 2 or more syllables. So the top 4 only have 2 syllables. Bitter, or more bitter, or really an American pronunciation would be bitter, more bitter. Polite, more polite. Tired, more tired. Modern, more modern. Now the next 4 adjectives all have 3 syllables. Important, important, more important. Expensive, more expensive. Difficult, more difficult. Beautiful, more beautiful. And the last word on the list actually has 4 syllables, but most Americans would not pronounce it as a 4-syllable word. You could say interesting. It's more interesting. Something is more interesting. Now, some Americans say interesting, more interesting, just removing the T. However, other Americans say interesting, more interesting. So that's the way I pronounce it. Interesting. With only 3 syllables. Now, a few adjectives don't use either ER or more. They change the spelling instead. These are called irregular comparative adjectives. There are not very many. So here are most of them, perhaps all of them. Good, better. Bad, worse. Far, farther, or further. We use farther if we are talking about distance. We use further if we are talking about degree. For example, I will look into that matter further. Little, less. We use less for an amount of something. But look at this. Little, littler. We actually do say littler if something is smaller than something else. Or if one child is littler than another. Notice we break the rule here. Little has 2 syllables, but we don't say more little. We can't say more little. How can you say something is more if it's getting smaller or if you have less of it? So in this case, we have no choice but to break the rule and say littler. So remember, don't say more better. Got it? Just say better.